Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Madhav Rajwade. I'm principal of Sathe College, which was earlier known as Parle College at Ville Parle. I am also connected to University of Mumbai in the form of Associate Dean of Science and Technology Faculty at University of Mumbai and many other activities. While I was vice principal of the college still, I was fortunate enough to get to know Professor Ashutosh Kotwal almost a decade ago. And here we are meeting again on this platform, Zoom, where Professor Ashutosh Kotwal is currently Fritz London Distinguished Professor at Duke University, North Carolina, state of United States of America. Prior to that, he was educated at University of Pennsylvania in electrical engineering with microelectronics as his specialty. Also, dear viewers, that he has finance degree as well, in addition to this electrical engineering background, makes him really multi-dimensional and I should say multi-faculty, as we say in national education policy in our country. With that under by his belt, he finished Ph.D. In the subject of physics in 1995. Both of us have, that's the only commonality, that is, I have at some point of time taught physics, and Professor Ashutosh Kotwal is actually dealing with the heart of the matter, so to say. He is a particle physicist, as we know, and particle physics is a very, very specialized field in case of the subject of physics, which actually, just to give a view to the viewers, this is a branch of physics where uh, they all deal with matters which are uh, quite uh, quite profound, to say the least, because these are inquiries to be made by human race, and we have gentlemen with us who are actually doing that for all of us. So these are inquiries, these are investigations to be made. Somebody will ask a question, why? The answer to that is very simple. That is only because we all are humans seeking answers on this planet Earth. And one such amongst us is Professor Kotwal here. So this is the only short introduction I have. I'm sure organizers are going to introduce him in a more lengthy fashion subsequently, and we'll find out more about him as we go along. So welcome, Professor Ashutosh Kotwal, to this platform.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rajwade. Wonderful to be here, everybody. Good morning to everybody. And yeah, I hope, can I make a suggestion that maybe we keep the interview a little bit less about myself and a little bit more about the kind of inquiry that will excite us all. Right? This is why I ended up from engineering and finance into particle physics. And it is absolutely thrilling. Not easy, lots of challenges, I will say, but when you discover even a small answer to an interesting question, it is a moment of absolute thrill. And if you get enough of these thrills in your life, you really feel it's a very fulfilling life. That's what I have to say. So let's get started.
Absolutely. That is the reason why Professor Kotwal kept it at the minimum, because let us straight away dive into questions and answers, which we are going to have this session for. So the first and foremost, that we gave formal introduction, but why not know about Mr. Ashutosh Kotwal? We have been speaking about Professor Ashutosh Kotwal. I mean, where are you from? Where did you start your life? A little bit about your family, and then we go into physics.
Good. So my father's family, I would say, is from Thane traditionally. My grandfather, I knew extremely well. When I started to get to know him at a few years of age, they were living in Shardashram in Dadar, actually, and he used to visit fairly frequently. He had 3 sons and a daughter. So my father has 3 siblings, or had 3 siblings. And so he joined the railways through the examination and so on. So which meant I had an interesting life, which at the time, sometimes my mother says I would complain because he would get transferred. So I was born, we are Maharashtrians, of course, but I was born in Kharagpur when he was stationed there, and then Kolkata, at the time it was called Calcutta. So I was very fluent in Bengali at the time. Then at the few years of age, we moved to Lucknow. So the Bengali sort of died away. Unfortunately, my mother insisted I should talk to all the friends who were Bengali in Bengali, so I would not lose the language. But most little boys don't listen to their mothers, is my feeling. So I sort of excuse myself. But there were many, obviously, Hindi-speaking friends. So then I switched to Hindi. So we were in Lucknow for some time. Then we moved to Delhi, and eventually only my last 4 years of schooling was in Mumbai. So high school was in Mumbai, but everything else was essentially I did a circuit from the east side of India to the north and then to the west. And then, as you mentioned, I got a scholarship to the University of Pennsylvania. I was going to go to the IIT, but it's another story. I was encouraged to think about the undergrad education here, which of course was prohibitively expensive, but when a full scholarship came along, then it became very attractive. So I had already thought I was going to be, a research person. So I was electronics, engineering, that was I would say, kind of a family tradition. So I was doing that. And during that process, Pennsylvania had this famous school, Wharton School of Finance. And many of the friends I met there, including those from India, Pakistan, and other places, were all excited by the glamour of finance at the time. This was the early 1980s, and Wharton, one of the best schools. So there was a lot of this hub going around, right? The smart people go to Wall Street, stuff like this, which at some point I started to realize was self-defeating. So many of my friends said, we are going there and you are, what can I say, smarter than us. So you should come with us and you will, take it over and everything. And during that education, I started to feel that what they considered a big deal was relatively straightforward from the perspective of math and physics, whereas whatever physics research I was doing and so on literally seemed far more profound. So, in some sense, I was somewhat arrogant, and I thought, yeah, all the stuff you call exciting to my finance friends is doesn't sound that big a deal to me. And what I'm seeing in the physics and math field is leaps and bounds more profound. And so that's where I want to go. Another aspect of that was the physics professor who mentored me, Professor Terry Fortune at Pennsylvania. He encouraged and, in fact, really instilled this thinking that if you are an out of the box thinker, if you like to learn new things and you want to expand your horizons and really appreciate the depth at which we can understand things, and then create your own experiments and so on to find more, then I remember his words, somebody like you belongs in physics. I can never forget that statement that he made when I was 19 years old.
What a compliment to start.
So, if you're a 19-year-old kid, a full, distinguished professor at University of Pennsylvania says something like this, he knew how to say the right words, right? And it sort of seduces you, right? It's the kind of language you want to hear, and you say, this person telling me this, here is where I should go. So this is how I end up, moving on from that world into the world of physics and fundamental questions. And I'll say one last thing. We keep in touch. It's been 40 years now. And all my finance friends and so on, they were fairly successful on Wall Street and various other places. So we have kept in touch, communication by email, or once in a while we visit, or phone calls. And in the end, they're all extremely excited by what I'm doing. And none of them really talk about what they are doing. And they keep asking me, so what's going on? What's up? What's new? What's happened? What are you up to? And I also ask them, so tell me what's going on, right? So, we've been friends for a long time. You've done this and done that. The conversation doesn't last very long on their work. It always keeps coming back to my work. So I'm thinking, yeah, I think I made the right choice back then. You must have
Absolutely.
a good life, but clearly you think I have a fantastic life. And so I'm glad that professor and I, or I ran into him. And, I hope that happens to everybody sometime, that somehow they find the
Absolutely.
thing
But
to make
no,
their life.
this is too much. Yeah, yeah. This is, I said, too much of modesty, Professor Kotwal. It doesn't happen with everyone. It happens with only a select few. Now, my question is that we understood how you were drawn into physics, but a subset of that is particle physics.
Yes,
Okay, I just said right in the beginning that this is really heart of the matter, to put it, correctly. How did you get into particle physics? There must be a story to that as well, like the one which you've told us right now for
yes.
physics. So tell us that.
Similar, it's related to that professor. So, accidents or good accidents happen to you. Sometimes you recognize them in some subliminal way. First summer I was there, I needed a summer job. I needed the money, and also why waste a summer, get some experience. That is what the universities offer. So I went to all the engineering professors that I knew, and none of them had any funding for me. So in the end, one of them advised me, what, we work with physics professors over there. We do instrumentation with them, we do electronics with them. So maybe one of them wants to design some electronics. So why don't you walk over there? So I said, okay, I'll walk over. I talked to one, two, three, they send me here, there. Finally, Professor Fortune says, tell me your skills. I may have something for you. Next summer, I'm looking again for an engineering job, same story. Okay. Eventually, I call him. I said, remember, I worked with you last summer. I'm calling a little late, but maybe I can do something useful for you again. He immediately says, I really liked what you did last summer. You are absolutely welcome to come back to me. Right? So, okay, this is how things go. You are seeking one thing and something else is seeking you. So, good. So one summer goes, second summer goes, third summer he says, I can send you to the Los Alamos National Lab. You can stay there the whole summer. We're doing more stuff. So I started learning what he was doing, and he was doing nuclear physics. So I asked him, the way you calculate things in nuclear physics and things that you're measuring, they're sometimes hard to follow. And he said, exactly, because nucleus is a complicated beast. The interactions are strong. It's a many body problem. I said, well, isn't there something we can get deeper, closer, where we can understand maybe more fundamentally? So it was some kind of naive question. He said, that's okay. If you think you want to go for something which is more building block like, then I suggest you switch from nuclear to particle physics. Right? So I asked him, well, what else could one do? He said, you can go the other direction. You can go to condensed matter physics, where there are even more many body interactions, and that could have some sophisticated phenomena going on. And so I thought, okay, let's think about condensed matter physics. Let's think about particle physics. He said, well, if you're thinking like this and you want a field that includes everything, fundamental particles flying around, many bodies flying around, everything is mixed up, you should go into astrophysics. So he was always pushing me one step further, one step further. So eventually I decided between astrophysics and particle physics. And one way or the other, various conversations said, if you think about the building block approach, which is what particle physics is about, you try to get to the smallest constituents, you try to understand their rules, equations of motion for the fundamental objects. Then you build up a structure from there, which explains many body interactions. This is where particle physics is coming from. And I thought that way appealed to me. So that's where I ended up choosing particle physics as opposed to astrophysics. That's
Absolutely. How far back in time was that?
This was the first summer job was 1984. So I came to University of Pennsylvania in
Correct.
83. These
Correct.
conversations are happening 84, 85, 86, by which time I had pretty much decided that I was going to switch. I was going to go for a PhD anyway, but I decided to switch from a PhD in sort of condensed matter physics or more solid state physics, device physics. I switched from those kind of thoughts into a particle physics PhD, which worried me a little because I didn't have a physics degree. I had an engineering degree, I had a finance degree. So I was a little worried, will I get admissions or stuff? And what will happen afterwards and so on. So I went back to Fortune, Professor Fortune, and he said, will I have a job? What will happen? He said, well, if you're the best at something, you will always have a job, which was a very true statement, but nothing assuring about it to a young person trying to make
You
it.
could still get a job.
So I remember this conversation. He was a hearty guy with big beard and everything. I said, Professor Fortune, that's always true, but you're saying in order to guarantee myself a job, I had to be really the best. He just laughed loudly and blew away the question. And in the end, it meant take a chance. If you really, really want to do something, take your chance and do your best. So I said, all right, take a chance.
I was saying that.
Go for particle physics.
Yeah, sure. I was saying that was 40 years ago. Now,
40 years ago.
Yeah, particle physics is something you chose to work with. Now, 40 years hence, like today we are in 2025. Uh, what are your thoughts on particle physics?
Particle physics traditionally addresses a certain set of big questions. So it's one field, I would say, that has a mathematical framework which is literally built on the shoulder of giants. I mean, if you imagine the most brilliant people in math and science, shall we say, um, starting from Euler, Gauss, Einstein, Newton, everybody. It's the rules at the level of clarity that they build, the mathematical theorems on the basis of which quantum field theory, special relativity is built. Not that we understand the basic origin, but it's an extremely rigorous framework. It has to be rock solid, not speculative, not hand wavy. Within certain set of axioms is either right or wrong. And a vast set of experts have built on that framework. So we have a field in which, in some sense, you get as close to truth, right? We'll have to ask a philosopher what truth ever means. But the most practical, solid definition of truth is some kind of theorematic understanding of nature. That if you describe X, Y, Z with this, and if the mathematics works exactly according to the following rules, then this will happen. And then if the other hypothesis is true, then that will happen. And either this happens or that happens, or something unexpected happens, which then evolves the rules. This process has continued for 100 years. And I see absolutely no indication that it will not continue for another 100. I mean, the level at which we understood 100 years ago has evolved so dramatically, and there is no indication that we have, what shall I say? It always feels like, if you look back in the past, some understanding is growing until you feel like it's becoming complete. And the example I love the best is classical mechanics was reaching that stage in the late 1800s, and people were building Eiffel Tower and electromagnetism and everything. And that seemed the framework for all of nature is in hand. From this point on, physics is becoming mature and we can do all kinds of technology on the basis of these rules. And here comes along completely unexpected special relativity. Here comes along quantum mechanics, and our complete understanding is expanded by 2 orders of magnitude. And it is still happening. There are massive mysteries associated with the dark matter, with certain manifestations of gravity, with the fact that gravity and quantum physics cannot be unified. People have been struggling for 40 years. With the notion that the Higgs boson exists, but its mechanism is completely unknown. So profound mysteries that existed for decades in the past, as they get resolved, more profound mysteries take their place. And I feel this approach is the right approach. We keep asking the hardest questions and always seek truly fundamental understanding of them. Never get satisfied with some hand-wavy answer. And just because it seems to work today doesn't mean it's satisfactory. So in this way, I believe we'll discuss maybe future projects and so on that are being pursued. But the field is ripe for more basic revolutions. If you look back 50 years from now, I think we will realize, yeah, we thought we understood everything about the weak interaction by the 1990s, and now we realize, yeah, that was just rudimentary. The real mysteries are just getting solved, for example, something like this. That's the history of our science, and that's the way it will continue.
Right. See, my next question was going to be about, how do you understand interplay between experimentation and theoretical foundations of particle physics? That was going to be my question. But before that, before you answer that, in your previous answer, you touched upon this particular field touching an area of philosophy. Okay. In a way, I think you slightly indicated an area called as metaphysics. So,
Yes.
yeah. So, can you just talk about that first a little bit, and then move to this next part of the question that if it is metaphysics, then how do you, verify all those theories experimentally?
The more I think about it, and I imagine anybody who thinks about it for a while will realize. So I keep thinking about, in our department building, there is various pictures of Einstein and other people, and there is a quote from Einstein. There are many brilliant quotes. And one of the quotes, I'll paraphrase, I don't know exactly how he said it, that he is absolutely amazed that the human mind is capable of understanding nature at all. That why should we expect whatsoever that the way nature evolved for billions of years, 13 billion years since the Big Bang, we believe, according to certain rules which govern everything around us, this massive creation is governed by those rules, that there is any possibility that we will understand any of those rules at all.
Great.
Why should you expect that? And yet, somehow we are understanding on the basis of some mathematical principles so much. Obviously, I would believe a tiny fraction of it, but at least we understand some fraction of it. What is the likelihood, if you think philosophically, that this could have happened, and yet it is happening? So it suggests, in a way, that this is part of our destiny. That part of our destiny is the same rules by which the universe got created, by which we got created within that universe. We are supposed to figure out or find out how those rules work. It's almost circular, right? That there is.
I understand. I'm sorry to interrupt you here. Is it getting a bit of a devotional kind of thing here right now when we are talking about?
Yes, I feel the presence of some divine entity in a way. Now I'm not sure I'm talking as a scientist. I'm just talking as a human being, which is encouraging us to discover it. It sort of made us and says, now you need to come find me. And that's your job, among other things, of course. So, lots of great, can say religious or leaders, philosophical leaders in our past have said this in many ways. And one can start seeing the similarities. Maybe this is one of the paths. I'm sure there are many paths. But I certainly at my age have started to feel that there is something out there, not to have, but to find. It is not about having, but the pleasure of it. It's a great pleasure. It's like somebody says, I'm going to climb a mountain, and you say, why? Well, I think Hillary said it. Edmund Hillary said it.
Yeah, Hillary said it. Just, yeah.
Why do you climb mountains? Because it's there.
Absolutely.
It is beckoning you to climb it, as if you can't rest until And if you make it to the top, Hillary will know, and Tenzing Norgay will know what it feels like to be the first one to the top of that mountain. And
Absolutely.
each of us, if we can find one little mountain that we climb for the first time, you feel
Job is done. Job is done.
job is done. You
I
feel
think this is one of the most profound statement of this interview, and I'm really thankful for Professor Kotwal to have said it. It's in the flow, but that's the correct thing to say. Now let's go to the experimental part of it.
in our field, the interplay between theory and experiment is extremely rigorous. And in a way, for two reasons. The theory is very rigorous. So you have to be extremely precise and concrete in what mathematical axioms you're building your theory on. People will check it very carefully if it has internal inconsistencies with other mathematical axioms which have already been demonstrated. So, and I make this statement because sometimes I notice in other fields too much loose talk, too much speculative talk, too much of this feeling that if something could be true, then it is true until proven false. And in our business, it is exactly the opposite. Nothing is true until it is experimentally demonstrated to be true up to some accuracy. So now we get into what the meaning of the experiment is. The experiment itself must also build on fundamental principles. It must also say very clearly, when this voltmeter or some equivalent gadget is recording these electronic signals, it means we are basing it on these following principles. And therefore, all this complicated data has the following simple interpretation. And people should verify it, people should reproduce it, people should check the logic very carefully. Maybe it has some flaws. And at the end of it, we arrive at this. The other amazing aspect of Einstein's statement is we are able to observe nature, and people talk about this in quantum mechanics. Are all the rules of nature there only because we are observers? I mean, there are brilliant people who ask, is quantum mechanics fundamentally relying on the existence of observers? So is a human being an observer? Is a cockroach an observer? I have no clue what that means. But somehow we have defined a protocol by which an experiment is understood by all of us as an observation. That's another philosophical point. What does it mean to observe the nature? But then in the end, it gets quantified to a number with a very precise understanding of its uncertainty, which is the other big thing about our field. You ask general statements out there and you ask, how sure are you? People barely bother to quantify the validity of any statement. You just make statements, and what is true, what is false is just opinions, I think, a lot of time. But we try to make it extremely quantified by the rule of statistics and so on. And then you get a precise calculation with a well-understood uncertainty and a precise observation with a well-understood uncertainty. And either they agree or they don't. And that interplay is sort of two giants of logic, one of experiment and one of theory, hammering on each other, and the field evolves from one rigorous step to the next. So the scientific method, this is the basic definition of scientific method, is
Absolutely.
among our field and other fields of hard sciences, it is our job to push the rigor of the scientific method to the extreme. Not take the easy route, not take the comfortable route or the pleasant route, or to say that it would be nice if this was true. So let's just be happy that with a lower level of rigor, it sounds true. But we are not here to feel happy. We are here to feel uncomfortable. We are here to feel this is hard work. But let's get it right. Let's get it right. Let's get it right. So this interplay is the interplay that eventually becomes the interplay between extremely rigorous theory and extremely rigorous experiment. Hopefully we keep that way. That's a scientific tradition that got us so far. And whatever else is happening in our ecosystem, we need to keep our head down and stick to that hard rigor. And I think the field is doing that.
True.
Brutal honesty. You have to be absolutely brutal honesty on yourself.
Brutal on it. Absolutely. Correct. Now, this Higgs boson happens, and how does it change your science? I mean, your science means the science which you're doing.
Science which you're doing. One of the big questions about the Higgs boson is that it was always understood as a rather not an extremely fundamental theory. So, to the extent that when we think about the theory of the forces, the theory of matter, how does an electron behave? How does a quark behave? What are its axioms? What is electromagnetism? What is the strong nuclear force? What are its axioms? Those axioms are far more rigorous, far more connected to the fundamental axioms of special relativity and quantum theory as compared to the Higgs. Right? So Higgs is somewhat what we say phenomenological. Some aspects of it are deeply rooted in quantum field theory. Other aspects are sort of parametric, or you just say, let's make a supposition that this would be true, and let's proceed with the math. The supposition is not well defended, not well explained, but let's proceed anyway and see where it takes us. Now, it took us to a place that happens to be consistent with nature, in the sense it took us to the prediction that there is a Higgs field, it lies all around us, and the excitations of that field, like sound waves in that field, will be appearing like Higgs bosons. It all seems to be consistent with experiment now for the last 10, 15 years, except that the original suppositions were always understood to be somewhat hand-wavy. So we are all a bit shocked, extremely puzzled, I would say shocked, that such a hand-wavy supposition seems to actually be working. It ought not to have been working, almost. That's how far we are along in the theory of electron, photon, and so on. So people have been thinking for a long time that the supposition got lucky, that it manages in some approximation to capture the deeper physics. And people have looked back, you can read history books that, for example, the Bohr atom, right? The Bohr atom turns out in detail to not be the right description of the atom. Bohr atom was literally electron revolving around protons like a planetary system. And you do some calculation with that supposition and you get the energy levels of hydrogen. So, okay. But somebody will ask the hard question, but an electron revolving around the proton fundamentally should radiate energy and orbit into the proton. So you create another supposition and you say that that's why it doesn't. But something loose and iffy about it, but it works. Then, of course, the real quantum mechanics, Heisenberg quantum mechanics, Schrodinger equation, wave function. And this truly explains why the Bohr atom, even though it was wrong in details, somehow got certain essential features correct. So Bohr was not mathematically correct, but he's, in his brilliance, got some correct insight, where the correct mathematics happens to give the same answer as that insight. And eventually it was figured out that Bohr, even though he was wrong in detail, he was right at a certain conceptual level. The Higgs is at that level. The current logic of the Higgs is like the Bohr atom. But we know from other examples like this is that it requires a further explanation to make it on more foundational footing. Its foundations are weak. And in fact, people have noticed it for 50 years that if you just pursue with the Higgs theory as it is now, if you probe it this way, that way, even at a theoretical level, it seems to have certain weaknesses which are not palatable. They are logically inconsistent. Right? So there's a certain known logical inconsistency with the Higgs theory, in the same sense that the Bohr atom had certain logical inconsistencies. So the conclusion I would say is that we believe, certainly many of us believe, that the next set of experiments will address by going to higher energy by probing the Higgs boson deeper, a deeper explanation of the Higgs boson will evolve. And there are certain possibilities. People, supersymmetry has put forward one hypothesis, and other hypotheses have existed. Those hypotheses are internally self-consistent, but they are different from each other. So it could be that hypothesis, it could be this hypothesis. But it is begging us to probe the Higgs deeper, because it certainly does not look like the end of a story. It looks like the beginning of, you found a big clue, but the real story is still to be found. So it's going to spawn a lot of new experiments, and my own work, which I'm using the W boson to probe the Higgs boson, is completely driven by that. So that I'll maybe go into the technical details later, but there are many ways to probe the Higgs precisely, and I chose one of them 27 years ago. And it seems to be telling us, I would say, the first clue that there is something beyond the standard model Higgs boson. The current accepted theory looks like it has some weaknesses, because that theory predicts the mass of the W boson very accurately, and what I've been measuring is different from it, significantly different from it. So it might be telling us that we need an alternate theory. That's another interesting aspect of scientific life, is if you find an observation that doesn't agree with an established theory, you can be actually extremely excited and think about what it might mean. So anyway.
You explain that. Now, see, we were in the territory of hard physics and, heart of the matter and so on. But let's enter a bit area where all this work, which is done theoretically, experimentally, and so on, what kind of spin-offs are there? Are there any spin-offs at all for people? Everybody doesn't understand this hardcore area. Okay, if somebody asks a question, which is a common question to ask, that when you pursue this kind of deep research, deep thinking, to an extent that it is metaphysical, fine, no problem. But what is in there for me? What are the spin-offs? What are the technologies which have emerged out of all this explorations in nature? That's the question.
Very good. It's an absolutely correct question to be asking, and we have to give an answer the best we can, because after all, this kind of research is not corporate. It's not at the moment commercial. So it is being done with taxpayer money. And so we have to offer an explanation to the taxpayers about why it's attractive, or what could be in it for us. So let me start on the small side. Known spin-offs which are impossible to predict until you see they happen. So it's a great question and a difficult question. But you can give examples from the past. So I am postponing the question of what do you predict for the future. I'm going to start by saying, what examples can I give you from the past? Many examples. Let me start with three maybe, which were unanticipated. Right? So the thing I'm trying to emphasize is, in our field, the spin-offs are unanticipated. So if you ask me, tomorrow, do you anticipate a spin-off? I will honestly have to say, I don't know. But if you now ask me, tell me something from 30 years ago, which was not anticipated then, but then it happened. So one example is magnets. So superconductivity has been around for a very long time.
Right.
If you try to build a magnet of a certain field strength, an iron core magnet will max out at about 2 Tesla, because iron will saturate. So you can't make a magnetic field stronger than that. Okay. So we needed stronger magnets because we want to bend the particles in a magnetic field so we can build the accelerator. So at Fermi National Lab, they said, okay, the next accelerator will have superconducting magnets, which means the current carrying components will be superconducting. So we can use massive currents and large magnetic fields. Any practical application? Maybe, but this is research. Let's just do this. It turned out that the industrialization of the making of this niobium titanium alloy for the superconductor people started realizing that the same alloy could actually be industrialized so well that another application in medical physics, which is magnetic resonance imaging. So magnetic resonance imaging means that you put water or protons, material inside a strong magnetic field, and you can map out the distribution of materials in anything, human body, whatever, by making a strong magnetic field and observing the radio signal. So you get a density profile in the body using magnetic resonance imaging. So this needed strong magnets, very specialized, very few places would have it. It turned out that the superconducting technology that got commercialized was discovered by companies as a way of making significant advances in the magnetic field strength and the price of the magnets. So the magnets needed by MRI machines started to become much cheaper and eventually reached a price, which is a direct spin-off of our work, that every hospital can now afford multiple MRI machines. And everybody knows MRI is in some sense far superior than X-ray scanning because there is literally no exposure to radiation of any kind, which other kinds of diagnostic tools have. MRI has, this is radio waves, so there is absolutely no impact. It's not intrusive in any possible way. So here is a powerful technique that is doing uncountable number of diagnoses every day, where the technology became possible through some completely unforeseen expedition, shall we say, in that sense. Another one, which is well known, is we needed to ship data internationally between one computer and another because some experiment is running on another continent. Data has to be transferred from there to another computer sitting in another continent. So Tim Berners-Lee at CERN invented a protocol by which you could start transferring data. Right? And initially it was just called, on the basis of the internet, the web. So some screen would pop up and you could transfer files across from here to there. And we all know the history. Soon the web became the World Wide Web. And you can tell me what fraction of the economy worldwide now is completely reliant on that one technology that came out of some solution that was needed for a technical problem that nobody in the world even cared about. Right? So I can give you, can I think of other examples? Each of these examples, if you compute finally the economic impact of some of these things compared to the cost of our projects. Now, when somebody says, what is the cost of your next project? And you say $2 billion. Sounds like a big number. It is a big number. But if we take all the spin-offs like this in the history of the last 30 years or something, and add up the economic benefit that they have generated. Somebody has done this, actually, just because people ask the question. There is a huge multiplying factor. It has been computed by, we saw this report once, by a panel of economists and technology experts, and it was commissioned to say, why don't you do an economic impact study for our field? Take a year and produce a report. The estimate was it is a factor of 20. It is a factor of 20. In other words, you put $1 into this, not knowing where something will come out, and you integrate over a long enough time period, you find a factor of 20 return on it. Now, if I was a CEO and you said, put in 5% R&D and your company will survive for a very long time because on a long-term horizon, you will keep generating, I would consider that an excellent bargain to be investing in, right? Typically, advertising budgets and other things like this are even bigger than that. So we always have to think about the future and see what so-called investment is needed, which is, what does it do? What does advertising do? You're just paying a whole bunch of people to take your message out there. Okay, so that's the cost of advertising because it needs to be done. Similarly, what are we doing here? We are investing. Literally, the money is going into investing in workforce development. It's not the material cost. In all of this, the material cost is not the cost. It's the cost of maintaining a scientific workforce. So you ask, why do you want to maintain a scientific workforce? Because that workforce is generating things just like any other workforce generates things which you need in the future. And not all of that, 95% of scientific work goes in identified problems for practical needs. That you need a better motor, you need a better transmission line, you need a better medical device, or you need a better rocket, whatever we need better steel manufacturing process, anything. But history has shown that far bigger applications will show up simply by saying if there is a hard problem to be solved, some fraction of the workforce should work on that problem. The challenge of solving that problem will force people to think out of the box. They will say, we can't build this without inventing that first. And then you say, you can't do that without inventing that first. So, like necessity is the mother of invention, solving the challenge creates inventions. And if you knew what it would have to create, it wouldn't be a challenge. It would have already been done. So you have to use that as the opportunity. I think that's the sort of philosophical answer here, that the challenge is an opportunity to improve ourselves. It's like any athlete, right? Why does the athlete try to break a record? What's the point? Somebody runs 100 meters in 9.5 seconds. Why does the next best athlete want to do it in 9.4 seconds? And after that, somebody will try to do it in 9.3 seconds.
No, absolutely correct.
Because
Actually, this question only, Professor Kotwal, this question was only
excellence is a goal in itself. And in a sense, sort of solving is a challenge just by hammering your brain on it is another way of pushing excellence. What can we do better
pushing
than
the boundaries,
push our boundaries,
pushing the boundaries.
pushing our athletic boundaries, pushing our mental boundaries, pushing our musical boundaries, literary boundaries, all aspects of human life. If you don't push our boundaries, we might as well remain in the caveman mode, right? Let's be hunter-gatherers and living in caves. What's wrong with that? Nothing wrong with that, except it doesn't.
True.
So
absolutely correct. See, we already agreed that this has to be done because it is there. It is need to be discovered. The question was only from the point of view of really understanding what are the spin-offs. You have answered that segment. Now, just next level of few questions, and then we'll go toward the end of the interview.
sure.
This field is a very collaborative field where you need to be together with a lot of people. I'm aware that you were at CERN as well. I mean, one has to be if you are in this field. What have been those days? What have been those experiences at CERN? We would like to know.
Exactly. I'm extremely proud of this, and that's another maybe thing I would like to use this question to emphasize what our field has achieved in a way from that perspective, from the sociological perspective. So Fermi National Lab, other US national labs, we all have massive collaborations. We've been doing this for decades. The size has grown, so the biggest ones are now at CERN, but we've had 500, 700 people collaborations at Fermi National Lab before this, and 100 people collaborations before that. When I was a grad student, people thought 15 people collaborations are large. And then it became 100 and became 700 and now 2000. If you take a step back and you say, what has caused huge organizations to come up, like companies, governance, and so forth? There is some motive. There is a motive to organize, to create a government organization or to create a profit generating organization or any such goals that we have in society. What binds our collaborations together in spite of different philosophies, different cultures, different ideologies worldwide, right? We have now collaborations literally over the entire world from any possible, you take race, you take gender, you take culture, you take language, you take no matter which variable you can imagine. People from completely opposite ends are working together. So you must say, oh my God, there must be an extremely strong, intense incentive they have, right? What can bind all these people together? Is it profit? Absolutely not. Is it some kind of political power? That can happen, right? We know that happens. No, we have absolutely no political power. We're always coming to the taxpayer and says, here's our project. What do you all think? It's truly, no matter how serious debates, getting sometimes pretty hardcore debates, like any other two human beings can discuss on any issue. Uh, it's not like we are all nice people. We are just as human as anybody else. People have serious disagreements and they will sometimes literally shout at each other, right? Like anywhere else. And yet we are doing this, and it's a matter of pride because somewhere in all our hearts we say, but there is a scientific truth to be pursued, and whatever it takes, we will do it. And for that sake, we will work together. Nothing will, salaries won't go up because of it, or no direct spin-off will happen that you can commercialize, or we will not create a power base with which we can win elections, or nothing like that. Absolutely nothing. So to me and everybody in my field, it is in the end a matter of great pride. I don't say that the humans involved are altruistic. It is not possible for any human being to be truly altruistic, right? We all have our personal ambitions and everything we would like in life. And yet the enterprise, to the best of my understanding, is truly altruistic, uh, and completely driven by what good does it do? Generate knowledge.
Absolutely.
And it's actually true. I mean, it's not just some storyline that a politician will spin off just to get your vote or something. It is literally true that we are generating scientific knowledge, and it's a very hard battle to convince each other that when somebody writes a paper, that it is scientifically correct. And yet people will do all those battles and everything because the whole goal is to get the scientific knowledge to be accurate. And that makes it all worth it. And that's what it is.
Makes it worth it.
That's what it is.
Makes it worth it. Absolutely.
Everything else is worth it. It is full of hassles. Any other hassle, anybody experiences in a educational institution or corporate institution or any institution, political institution, there are all kinds of hassles. Somewhere people get in each other's way. It's no different from any other large group of people in every other way. And yet it functions, and it is completely driven by a set of bylaws. So we have a constitution. Every collaboration will come together in the beginning. Everybody will sit around and we will generate a written document, which is equivalent to a constitution. We call it bylaws. And no matter what happens, conflict, disagreement, this, that, or the other, we proceed according to the bylaws. And in the end, there is order. And all of it is achieved without sacrificing science, whatever it takes. So I'm extremely pleased with the power of that scientific goal. It will sooner or later override all the other issues that human beings have, and the right thing happens. It's an
Absolutely. It is almost like while you were talking, one comparison came to my mind. It is like a commander commanding his army and taking it to the task, complete the task which is handed out to them. Precisely, the goal is like that. That's sacred. I mean, the sacredness over there is comparable over here.
Yes, And
Yeah.
sacredness survives. Even all the other things between human beings, they all somehow work themselves out. And the collective belief in the sacredness eventually bubbles to the top, and the goal gets achieved. The goal of getting science done gets achieved.
Okay. A couple of questions more and over two or three only. Uh, One is like this, that what we are discussing is this a profound area of physics, particle physics, which requires an extremely, as you it has come out of your conversation with me, is the scientific rigor required. Okay, you have to be very strong on that. But also, this kind of research or any research for that matter requires creativity, which doesn't necessarily follow that logical path. So these two appear to be a contradictory phenomena. Okay, so how do you
Yes.
see this relationship?
So where does creativity come from? Even I've watched a little bit. You mentioned metaphysics and so on. So people like Penrose and so on have, in their brilliance, also thought about
Roger Penrose, yes.
consciousness. Is there any possible explanation for where spontaneous thought comes from? And I won't digress too much, but I have started thinking whether this craze of so-called AI is truly, I mean, even Bloomberg News has this, we want to create super intelligence or something. In a word, I am not in favor of all of that. So let me just put it out there. Because it pretends to be a replacement for human consciousness and human creativity, and it is absolutely not. In my understanding of what is happening in there, with gazillions of softwares and gazillions of unknown parameters in there, it is absolutely not that. Not what a human creativity and not what human consciousness is. That's my opinion. But related to human consciousness is this notion that we spontaneously create something that didn't exist, what we call an idea, or what we call let's see, oh, I just thought about this. Right? You don't know if somebody else has ever thought about this or not. And the things that we consider brilliant in the history of science and math is actually nobody thought about that before. So many brains have come and gone, and something occurs for the first time. How is that? What is that? The rigor comes into saying just because it sounds like a great idea doesn't mean it is logically sound. It may have a logical flaw. So now you have to get back to that brutal honesty. On the one hand, you encourage the spontaneous thought, and as soon as it occurs to you, you write it down or you tell somebody and you say, let's think about this. But then you switch to the rigor mode. There are all kinds of smart sounding ideas which are scientifically flawed. So now let's see if this one is scientifically flawed. And you have to be brutally honest and say, honestly, one should say, if it was that smart, somebody would have thought about it. So probably somebody else has thought about it and shown that it's actually scientifically flawed. So let's make sure. And so then you start on the rigorous path and you check, check, check. And you say, well, I tested it this way, I tested it that way. I don't see anything wrong with it. Then you do peer review. So you tell other people, you write it down, you put it on the archive or whatever mechanism. That sounds right to me. I've checked everything I can. Can you check me? And people will say, it can't be that great. I'm going to show that it's actually flawed. And then they work on it and they say, no, this sounds right. And eventually, more and more people may check it. And if it is truly a good idea that doesn't have scientific flaws, then everybody says, well, it sounds like you actually have had the correct idea that works. And
Good.
then it's a nice thing, right? Then it's one more new idea. So
One step ahead.
one step ahead. So the first step is let the ideas get bursting in your brain, whatever it takes. I don't know what it takes. Maybe a nice cup of coffee will do it. Maybe standing on the beach will do it. Who knows? Maybe listening to music will do it. Maybe you climb the top of the mountain and then it occurs to you. Who knows how it occurs to you? But then you come back down and you say, let me check it. Let me check it. And then the rigorous process starts. And many a time it's disappointing. You say, oh, I wish that idea was right, but turned out to be flawed. It had a, I forgot about this. And if you put that
Brutally
in,
honest.
brutally honest. But you keep trying, and maybe the third one is actually right. And you say, the third time's the charm. And then you get a good idea, which is actually correct. And then you say, my life is made. It doesn't matter how many things, like Edison said, right? Doesn't matter if 2000 light bulbs didn't work. One more way for it not to work, but the 2001st worked. And that's the only one that matters. So there is a, yeah, yin and yang between the ideas and the rigor.
Yin and yang.
One
Absolutely.
without the other is useless. You have to have both.
You're right. Yeah. So my penultimate question is this, that this field which we are discussing for last 1 hour or so uh, is a theoretical one, and the gestation period of starting a project and hitting upon something worthwhile is really quite long.
Yes.
Now, how do you remain sane in that period?
The
How does one remain sane? Only motivation.
biggest part of the answer is, if that's if that's the only way to answer that scientific question, then so be it. It's People have said amazing things about the fact that Einstein was struggling with general relativity for 10 years. What kept him sane? He had an instinct and he said, maybe this will go wrong, that will go wrong. I think he has admitted he was not the strongest mathematicians compared to the people of his stature. But he kept pursuing his instinct and must have been many pitfalls during that time, but eventually a logical thing came together. It is also true that later he tried a similar idea of unifying his GR, general relativity theory, which is a gravity theory, with electromagnetism, because there was one established logic, another established logic. Shouldn't there be a physical theory which combines both logics? And this he was doing for what I understand 25, 30 years of the last part of his life. And this he did not succeed. Well,
Correct.
what kept him going? Or any enterprise that seems to have a long gestation period? You have to be able to do mid-course corrections. And you keep checking your instinct. Is it still sound like the right approach? There were fundamental technological challenges or logical challenges to be resolved. Let's take the biggest one and see if we can crack that nut. If you crack the most big one, then you try the next most complicated issue and say, can we crack that one? And if they keep cracking one after the other, you say, well, it was an idea, but now it's starting to become practical. So let's keep pushing forward. That's one way. Mid-course corrections do happen. The third thing that can happen is somebody else, in the meantime, comes up with an alternative. And then you say, oh, we thought this was the only way, so we kept pushing this way, but a new avenue has showed up because of a new technology. Usually some completely spontaneous thing happens in a different field for a different reason. And if people say, oh, that breakthrough can now make our life much easier. So why don't we change the direction of our project a little bit, exploit that breakthrough? We didn't anticipate that would happen, but now it makes our life easier. So, people have had expeditions in the past. I always wondered, why did Magellan take this extremely risky task of trying to go around the world in a ship 500 years ago? We know what happens to ships. They can crash, they can hit rocks, a storm can happen, you can die of hunger, thirst, disease. I don't know what he had to do to make it. But who knows? Does it take a year? I forgot how long Magellan ship from here to here. It kept going one direction and eventually came back. It must be a very nice set of books written about how he made it. But you look back and you say, what kept him going? But it's absolutely essential to us, right? I would not be in America right now, and all the people who came.
Yeah,
So you don't know what's out there. So somebody keeps
understand.
going, and many people who keep going may succeed, may not succeed, but there is something very inspiring about, like they say in Gita, right? Keep going. Don't worry whether your goal will be met or you want something at the end. Don't worry about it. If you think you're on the interesting path or whatever, then I'm no expert on the Gita, but this
Actually, the question which I was going to close
like
this
that.
interview with
Going.
has become redundant because you've already answered it probably. I was going to say that what would be your advice to the new entrants to the field, like students? But I think probably you have uh, uh, answered it unless you want to add something more to it.
Most
Like
of
keep
it,
going.
most of it is what is in your heart. What uh, when you say this is my priority, you have to say, if push comes to shove, some challenge appears, which will, am I willing to give up a little bit of this, a little bit of that, in order to pursue the goal that I really want to pursue? It could be math, it could be science. I mean, I see, it's always a struggle, but when I notice the struggles that people go through to become musicians, to become stage actors or something like this, it's enormously more. So painter, right? Enormously more. I mean, you have no idea whether you'll even have food. But people are trying, people are doing second jobs and third jobs while they pursue their hobby to become a painter or an artist or musician or, actor or something like this. And then something happens and you hear the stories, right? That person got a break, that person got a break. So you make sure that, like, I think Ted Turner said it, right? You have to keep showing up. 90% of success is show up, and some door will open
Absolutely.
somewhere. And another person has said, what does opportunity look like? Opportunity looks like it shows up in overalls, right? Oiled clothes, and it looks like it means get to work. And that's what opportunity looks like. Uh, so if you really think this is what you want to do, if your mind is made up and you're willing to do, keep going. Some door somewhere opens.
Just do it. I mean, just do it. That's the
Yeah.
that's the thing. Yeah. So
Don't
I'm
expect
really,
it will be
really
easy. Don't expect
yeah.
it will be easy. But I'll say one last thing. It happened to me. When somebody sees your true passion, 20 people will see your true passion, 19 people will do nothing about it. But there'll be one person who will do something about it.
Right.
And that one person, if you keep making sure that people are seeing your passion through your work, dedication, everything, sooner or later a person will show up who will say, I need somebody like you, or you need to be doing this, and I'll
Great.
give you the opportunity, something like that. And that's how it happened for me, and eventually it happens. So there are good people in the world looking for people who are driven, and sooner
Looking
or
for
later,
good people.
and one of them will find you. And
That's good. That's good. I'm extremely happy to be part of this conversation today, and I think
wonderful.
one of the best thing happened to me personally, and I hope that the listeners also would be of the same opinion because we have had a very good time last 1 hour,
And
and I must thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity, and Professor Kotwal, it was good connecting to you, and we hope that we find more occasions to come and
absolutely.
talk to you. Okay. So
And I
thank you,
visit Pune,
Nitin, for
Mumbai,
the
so I'll probably see you
yeah,
somewhere soon in
yeah, yeah.
physics.
Sure, sure. Welcome. Welcome to India.
Thank you.
Good night from here.
Good morning to you. Thank you.